Hello, welcome, namaste, good afternoon. Those of you joining me in the room, those of you joining me on Zoom, and those of you listening to the recording afterwards. This is a little Dharma talk that I like to call Living from the Heart, all about this 18-inch spiritual journey, which can sometimes take many lifetimes just to travel from the head to the heart. I like to start with a poem of my own as a lead-in to this week's topic. Close out with a short meditation to integrate what we've talked about. And then we'll have some time at the end for question and answer. So today's poem is untitled from my collection, entitled Pebbles. So a series of short poems. And this one goes, I sat with a flower and it said, our whole lives we try to gain, only to end up with all that we have given. I sat with another, and it said, the mind will break the world into a million pieces. Only the heart can make it whole again. Then I found a third that said, everything is either growing or decaying. There is no middle, but the choice is yours. Our topic for today is on what I like to call the physics or the metaphysics of the heart, and how we are often taught that to be successful in this life, it's a matter of accumulation of material wealth. But in our task of growing the heart, we find things operate a little bit differently. Love isn't something that you can quantify, and you don't have 100 pounds of it, and you have to divvy it out to the people in your life, including yourself. Love works quite opposite to how we generally interact with objects in the world, and that the more that we give away, the more that we receive. The more that we give, the more that we gain. So St. Francis put it this way, it is in giving that we receive, it is in forgiving that we are forgiven, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. When we do talk about this reality, and that the more love we give away, the more that we have, it can almost seem like a fantasy or an ideal or a bit of a kind of woo-woo kind of practice of free love. Oh, just give all the love that you have away and it will come back. But this is confirmed by research, psychology, and neuroscience. So, for example, when I interviewed the Stanford researcher Sonia Lyubomirsky, who works out of Stanford and does a lot of research into how compassion and altruism is good for our emotional well-being. And she absolutely has found in her research that kind acts for others, altruistic acts for others, do create an internal sense of happiness. So we're often told that money can't buy you happiness. And she would say that's not true. We just spend money on the wrong things. We spend money on ourselves when we should be spending money on other people, because that is actually what gives us a lasting feeling of happiness. And there's a lot of reasons this is, but one of the reasons that she cited to me was that it's pretty hard to do a kind act or an altruistic act without also creating some kind of human connection. As an example, if you're going into work and you decide to buy 20 bagels or 20 donuts on the way to work, you get to walk into work. As you walk in, people will see you with your box of delicious goods and they might smile. They might express gratitude. They might express appreciation. Then you get to see 20 individuals go up to this box of goodies that you've received, and you get to see them enjoy the pleasure of eating what you have decided to bring. So in that, a connection is made. So connection, belonging, is also foundational to our feelings of emotional health and well-being. As human beings, we are wired to connect. So the research has also shown that our need for connection and belonging is just as crucial for our health and well-being as something like food and water. That poor social disconnection is just as bad as smoking a pack of cigarettes every single day in terms of our longevity and overall health and wellness. So, one of the ways that giving love we return is that a true, authentic connection is made. So, if you do something nice for your partner, they will be happy and it will deepen your connection, and that will in turn make you happy. Even if you just were to give money to somebody begging on the street, you can look them in the eye as you offer them what you are giving them, and it will again create a little bit of authentic connection. So there's a story of a king who needed to hire a new general, and he had two candidates for the job. So he gave each of the candidates for the next general a chicken, and he said, I want you to go kill this chicken where no one will see. So they go, okay, okay. And about half an hour comes back, and they both come back, and one general has no chicken, and the other general does have a chicken. And he asked the first one with no chicken, so how'd it go? And he'd go, oh, it was no problem at all. I just went behind that shed. I looked around and nobody saw what I did. So I killed the chicken and came back. He asked the second general, I noticed you still have your chicken. You did not kill your chicken. Are you saying that you couldn't kill a chicken where no one was able to see? And he said, well, wherever I went, not only did the chicken see, but I saw too. And of course, that general is the one that got the job. Because in war, there is no victors. There's only people who lose less. So when we do kind acts, generous acts, acts of tenderness and caregiving, even if nobody else sees, guess who sees? You see. And most of the time, the person that you are tending to also sees. So human connection is crucial to our happiness and well-being. And Hafiz put it this way: admit something. Everyone you see, you say to them, love me. Of course, you do not do this out loud, otherwise someone would call the cops. Still, though, think about this great pull in us to connect. Why not become the one who lives with a full moon in each eye that is always saying with that sweet moon language what every other eye in this world is dying to see? So if he says, admit something, everyone you see, you say to them, love me. But of course, we don't do this aloud. And I think we have all experienced this. We want to belong. We want to be seen, honored, recognized, and accepted for just who we are. So there's a natural urge in us to connect. We are wired to connect. And another way to put this is that the heart, this heart of ours, longs to be open. Just as the bud longs to become a flower, our heart longs to be open. And I was thinking about this teaching recently because often before a yoga asana class, I'll ask my students what they want to work on. And very commonly, people say heart openers. People say shoulders, neck, ribs. I want this place inside of me to open. And I was thinking about this because I was preparing for this talk, and I was like, in all my years of teaching, not a single person has ever requested heart closers. It's like in all this time, no one's like, actually, I wish I was more closed down. So there's a yearning in all of us to connect. There's a yearning in all of us to open. And there's a lot of differences in the human condition, right? We have Democrats and Republicans and Muslims and Christians, but I find underneath all of our differences, the one thing that unifies us all is this yearning to connect, is this yearning to live with a wide open heart. And a huge reason for that, in my opinion, is that loving and living with an open heart is our natural state of being. So Swami Satchidananda, for example, says, guess what? There's nothing you can do to attain happiness. Huge reason for that is happiness is not to be attained outside of you, but inside. And he says, fortunately, you have it already until you disturb it. So the common metaphor to describe the human mind is that of almost like an ocean or like a body of water, and we experience mental turbulence. So 2000 years ago, Patanjali wrote the Yoga Sutras, and in it he said, Yoga, Chitta, Vritti, Nirodha. Chitta meaning mind, Vritti meaning turbulence, and Nirodha meaning cessation or stopping. So yoga is the calming of the mind. And when we think about a lake, for example, all you need to do for the lake to become calm is to stop disturbing it. So when the wind stops blowing, the lake naturally becomes calm. And all the seemingly separate waves become one with the lake and one with the water. So we have this also basic idea that our natural state, when it's not disturbed, is to be open, is to connect. But things happen, and almost out of our control, we close down. So 2 monks were washing their bowls in the river when they noticed a scorpion that was drowning. So one monk immediately scooped it up and set it upon the bank. And in this process, the scorpion stung him. And the monks continued washing their bowls. Scorpion, not being a very smart scorpion, continued to walk, fall into the water. The monk scooped it up, got stung, put it back on the land. One monk turns to the other one, as happens in these stories, and says, why do you continue to save the scorpion when you know it is its nature to sting? And he says, because to save it is my nature. Loving, tenderness, kindness is human nature. We even see this with very young infants. If you put 2 infants in the same crib and one starts crying, the other one will naturally turn over and comfort the other one. It is human nature to love, to take care of one another. So we even say it's not survival of the fittest. It is a survival of the most nurtured. Human beings have survived on this planet because we are the most cooperative species on the planet. We take care of each other. So we want to be open. The heart longs to be open. It is our natural state, but things happen to us and we naturally close down. We want to love with an open heart, but then what happens? We get hurt and we close down as a form of protection. There's a story of a man and his wife who have been married for over 50 years. They share everything except for one thing. The wife keeps a shoebox in the back of their closet. And she asked her husband to never look in the old shoebox that she kept in the closet. So the man never did. He just figured it was one of those things. And one day, the wife fell ill and didn't have much longer to live. So she called her husband to the hospital bed and told him it was time for him to take a look at the shoebox. So the old man went home, grabbed the box, and opened it. And inside, he found 2 crocheted dolls and $50,000. And he goes, what? How? Totally mystified by what he found. And he went back to the hospital and asked his wife, and he said, well, right before we got married, my grandmother told me the secret to a happy marriage was to never argue. She said, if I ever got angry with you, I should stay quiet, keep it to myself, and crochet a doll. The old man was touched. There were only 2 dolls in the shoebox. She had only been angry with him 2 times over the course of their marriage. So he gave his wife a big hug and then asked, but where did the money come from? And she said, oh, that's the money I made from selling all the dolls. So I think we've all experienced this. We set the intention to love our partner till death do we part, and we get annoyed, or we get triggered, or our deepest childhood wounds get pressed, And suddenly we find our loving intention simply go out the window. So Rumi put it this way. He says, gamble everything for love if you are a true human being. If not, leave this gathering. Half-heartedness doesn't reach into majesty. You set out to find God, but then you keep stopping for long periods at mean-spirited roadhouses. Don't wait any longer. I love that line. You set out to find God, but then you keep stopping for long periods at mean-spirited roadhouses. So we set out to love. We set out to love this world with a wide open heart, but then we find ourselves stopping. We find ourselves getting sidetracked at mean-spirited roadhouses. And this comes up a lot. I love teaching about love, that our purpose on this life is to discover the unconditional love that lies within the heart of each and every human being. And inevitably, on this path of telling people to love everyone at all times, somebody will raise their hand and they'll say, but what about blank? What about those people? And this is one of the great parts about the practice of unconditional love is that we say love reveals everything unlike itself. Your attempt or intention or aspiration to love all things will point out all the ways that we resist, all the ways and obstacles that get in the way of love from flourishing. So each what about is a signpost to exactly where you are stuck and exactly where you are resisting on this path of love, on this path to God. So maybe for you, it's what about that politician that I don't particularly like? What about my mother-in-law? What about the murderers? What about the pedophiles, right? It's what about whatever it is that is resisting your love? And that all is a signpost pointing to what understanding of humanity do I need to come to so that this resistance naturally falls away. So last week we talked about what it means to get in touch with our common humanity, what it means to recognize that we're all in the same boat, that we all want to be happy, and none of us want to suffer. And I want to add on to that and talk a little bit about why we suffer. After all, the first noble truth is that life contains suffering. And also the four reminders, one of them is that life contains suffering. So it seems like a very crucial aspect of the spiritual path to tackle this idea of suffering and why we suffer in order to alleviate ourselves from it. And this is something we discover as soon as we pay attention, as soon as we notice our thoughts, emotions, and sensations, or tune into any aspect of our form, we realize that everything changes. Everything is constantly changing all the time. The only constant is change. Everything is interdependent. Everything arises due to a set of causes and conditions. And if any one of those causes and conditions cease to exist, so too does whatever we've reified as having its own existence. So this is why we suffer, because anytime we look outside of ourselves for a source of happiness, that thing will eventually change like everything else. So we buy a brand new car and it makes us very happy until it gets a scratch. And we get a brand new house and it makes us very happy until the roof springs a leak. Anything that we clutch onto, we hold onto for happiness is eventually going to change because everything in this universe is constantly changing. So as the saying goes, if you try to hold on, you will get rope burn. Your suffering will be directly proportional to your attachments. So we suffer in relationships in our task of love because things change. We change, our partner changes, and our love changes. So indeed, if you are relying on something outside of you to induce a constant feeling of something inside of you, then it's not going to work out. So there's a Zen saying, we like flowers, We don't like weeds, but that doesn't stop the flowers from wilting and the weeds from growing. And I love any metaphor that involves plants, flowers, and weeds, because that is one of the things that we do in our meditation practice. We tend the garden of the mind. We plant the seeds of our intention that we wish to grow, and we look for the weeds. And as any gardener knows, if you're going to water something, you're not going to water at the leaves. You're not even going to water a flower at the flower. You're going to water at the roots. And same thing, if you're going to pull a weed out, you just pull a leaf or even just pull the very top part of the weed. Guess what? It's going to grow back. So part of our task on the spiritual path is to get to the root of suffering and the root of happiness. So there's a story of Franz Kafka, who found a young girl crying in a Berlin park. She had lost her doll and was inconsolable. As the story goes, Kafka said to her, "Oh, don't worry. Your doll is not lost. It's just traveling the world." And in that moment, he goes home and writes a fake letter from the doll and presents it to the girl who sees her next. And the letter says, "Oh, I'm off traveling in Berlin and Paris, and don't worry, I'll be back in no time." So the story goes that Kafka continued to come back to the girl and visit her, and each time he came back, he would come with a new letter describing the doll's great adventures. Finally, after a few weeks, he goes to the store and buys a brand new doll and returns it to the girl and says, "Don't worry, the doll has been changed by her travels, but it's the same one." And in the doll's letter, it said, "My travels have really changed me." And as the legend goes, years later, as an adult, the girl finds the doll, and tucked inside the doll, she finds the final note. And in it, it says, "Everything you love will probably be lost, but in the end, love will return in another way." So there's a saying, if you love something, set it free. If it doesn't come back, it wasn't meant to be. So there is, of course, some natural fear to change and a natural desire to hold on. And when we hold on, what's happening in the body? Resistance, tension, and tightening, and a little bit of closing. So as we notice the passing stream of sensations, our goal is to let go of resistance, let go of our desire for things to stay the same, and allow the passing stream of life to move through us. So an important part of recognizing our common humanity is seeing how we're all in the same boat of suffering. We all experience suffering, and we all want to be happy. We all attempt to remain constant in a ceasingly changing world, and those attempts simply create more suffering. We seek outside for an internal experience like happiness and joy and love. And anytime we are dependent on something outside for this internal feeling, that thing will change and we will end up suffering. So the flip side of recognizing our common humanity is that we're all trying our best. Even those people we might label as doing bad things in the world, they are still trying their best. They still do not want to suffer and do want to be happy. So a very powerful mantra that we apply in compassion cultivation trainings, it's what's known as the just like me mantra, where we think of somebody, and it's nice to start with somebody easy, but you can eventually work on somebody difficult and think they're just like me. They're just like me in that they want to be happy, and they're just like me in that they do not want to be in pain. They're just like me in that they have made mistakes, they've been hurt, they've lost people that they care about. And just like me, they have hopes and dreams and aspirations. And in that understanding, connection is formed, and a natural feeling of tenderness and care arises from this understanding and common humanity. So along with this just like me mantra, along with recognizing our common humanity, we can also see inside every human being what you might call a basic goodness, what you might call an unshakable or unbreakable goodness. You might call it Buddha nature, you might call it Christ consciousness, you might call it God or the divine or love or source. In yoga, we sometimes say it's the Purusha. In Vedanta, we sometimes say it is the Atman. Whatever it is goes beyond words. All of these words are just fingers pointing to the moon. And that moon is just as bright as our inner nature. So, our task when we are on the spiritual path, on this path of self discovery, self awareness, and self realization, is to discover our own inherent goodness. And in turn, we will realize that everybody has an inherent goodness. And then we can see it in others. So, Albert Camus put it this way: in the midst of hate, I found there was within me an invincible love. In the midst of tears, I found there was within me an invincible smile. In the midst of chaos, I found there was within me an invincible calm. I realized through it all that in the middle of winter, I finally found that within me there lies an invincible summer. And that makes me happy. For it says that no matter how hard the world pushes back against me, within me there is something stronger, something better, pushing right back. So there's all sorts of different practices, all sorts of different dialogues to get us in touch with this basic goodness. When Thomas Merton described his mystical awakening at the corner of 4th and Walnut in Louisville, Kentucky, he said it was almost like he began to see everybody just as God sees them. He says each person had their own secret beauty. I love that. Basic goodness, secret beauty, Buddha nature, it's all the same. So there's another famous dialogue where the Dalai Lama first came to the West and he was giving talks and having his own question and answer. And somebody in the crowd in the Western world went up to him and he said, "How do you handle self-hatred?" And when the Dalai Lama heard this, he was confused and he went back and forth with his translator. And he just fundamentally could not understand how somebody could hate themselves. And his reply in that moment was, "But we all have Buddha nature." So for him, he knows his own inherent goodness is also available in everyone at all times. If you don't resonate with the term Buddha, just recognize Buddha means awakened one, which basically implies we all have the capacity to awaken inside of us. I've also heard it described as a turning and burning diamond. And I've also heard Pema Chodron describe it as a diamond that has been buried under 1,000 miles of mud for 1,000 years. The implication being there's going to be some digging. There's going to be some effort to uncover our basic goodness. It's not just going to, well, it might happen on its own through the grace of God, but for most of us, it's going to take some effort. So recently I've been seeing a lot of people saying this basic idea that love is not enough, that a feeling of love is not an appropriate foundation for an intimate relationship. And I totally understand this sentiment that if you think love is something that arises within you once you have performed all the tasks to find the right person, right? After you've swiped through all the apps and gone through all the dates, and then you finally find the one, that you will just naturally feel an upwelling of love till death do your part. I would also agree that that is not going to be enough to sustain your relationship. So if you do think that love is a feeling that somebody else induces inside of you, well, guess what? Somebody else is going to change. Our environment is going to change. We are going to change. And we can't rely on a feeling outside of our control to stay constant for the rest of our lives. However, I do find that if you do think love is not enough, it does come from a misunderstanding of what love truly is. So you might know the following passages from the book of Corinthians, which goes, if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but I do not love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Try that one next time. Keep no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. Love never fails. So now these three remain: faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. So we also find this lesson fundamentally in the Gita. When Arjuna asks Krishna, which path is best? And there's different interpretations about the yogic paths that Krishna elaborates upon in the Gita. Some say there's four, some say three, sometimes some say two. At the minimum, there's the path of knowledge, there's the path of actions or works, there's the path of self-discipline and mastery, and then there is the path of devotion. And however many paths we kind of can find by interpreting the Gita in different ways, there's one lesson deep in there that the path of love and devotion is the best. Arjuna asks, which is better, the path of works, which is karma and selfless service, or the path of love and devotion? And Krishna encourages the path of love and devotion. So between faith, hope, and love, the greatest of these is love. So an internal feeling of love that somebody induces in us might not be a good foundation for a relationship. But a love that comes from inside, that is offered, that is given freely and not imposed upon another, it's a pretty good step to take. So in Buddhism, it's called the bodhicitta. So translating Sanskrit is always a bit tricky, because earlier I just mentioned chitta can mean mind, but in Sanskrit, there isn't the bifurcation of mind and heart that we have in the West. So you might see bodhicitta as translated as awakened mind and also awakened heart. Fundamentally, it's both. It's awakened heart, mind. The mind, at least in Eastern cosmology, includes the heart, or we could also say the heart includes the mind. So Pema Chodra again says that bodhicitta is a clear, unobstructed energy that exists inside all of us. We all have bodhicitta, which is just yearning to awaken. So we would also say in Eastern cosmology that the reason that you were incarnated into this body is because life is a classroom and love is the lesson. And we're here to gain the lesson of love in order to awaken the heart of bodhicitta, which is a love that is always offered and never imposed. So going back to Patanjali, one of my favorite sutras goes, the mind will remain calm if you can cultivate an attitude of friendliness towards the happy, compassion towards those in pain, delight for those with good fortune, and impartiality towards negative people. So you might notice the four immeasurables are in that sutra, right? We have loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. Patanjali says, yes, all you have to do is find a calm mind. Just notice your breath. And what will you notice? The mind stopping at mean-spirited roadhouses. As we say, it's really hard to find a calm mind after a day of killing and stealing. So non-killing and non-stealing are some of the precepts that we take in yoga if we are to find a calm mind. So, a loving mind that has attitudes of friendliness towards the happy, compassion towards those in pain, and delight for those in good fortune is also going to find a calm mind. So, the catch to bodhicitta is that an awakened heart is going to have an intense desire to alleviate the suffering of others. This is why those who have attained bodhicitta end up becoming bodhisattvas. They have cured themselves of any suffering and have now made vows to end all the suffering of all sentient beings because it stems from a desire to alleviate suffering from a completely open, awakened, and loving heart. So, in my opinion, love is enough. If it's a love that is committed to alleviating suffering, if you can say to your partner, as Thich Nhat Hanh would say, darling, I care for you. That is why I am here for you. Darling, I know that you are suffering, and that is why I am here for you. A love that is committed to having your partner be happy and not suffer is a love that is enough because it's a yearning, it's an intense desire and a longing for the person that we are with to be happy. So this is kind of the basis for what you might think of like a secular ethics, essentially, that every human being wants to be happy. No human being wants to be in pain. So how do we label an act as good or an act as bad? Well, bad acts are those that create and perpetuate suffering, and good acts are those that alleviate suffering and create the conditions for happiness and joy. So in an intimate partnership, we are trying our best to have our partner feel better. If your partner is crying all the time, that is not love. Love is patient, love is kind. If you find yourself being jealous or envious all the time, that is also not love. Love does not envy, it does not boast, and it is not proud. So we tap into this bodhicitta, we tap into this awakened heart, and we do it by noticing our discomfort with suffering because that reflects a desire to alleviate it. We notice the tensions, the tightness, the armor, the holding patterns, even the fear that we put around the heart, and we let that melt away. So in the Dhammapada, it even says, just as old petals fall as the flower continues to bloom, let lust and hatred fall away. And this talks about how we work with these more challenging emotions. We don't throw it away. We don't even push it away. They will naturally fall away as we cultivate feelings of friendliness, goodwill, and loving kindness. And guess what happens when those petals naturally fall away and come into the fertile earth? It becomes compost and it fertilizes and grows the flower. So as we say, no mud, no lotus. Our difficulties are grist for the mill. We can awaken amidst the difficulties by fully integrating them and digesting them. So this reflects the power of our attention and why we cultivate loving presence and why we are here to train the mind to be present, because we must go into our difficulties, into our resistance, into our holding patterns and see them for what they are, impermanent, like everything else. So we're not here to eradicate challenging emotions. We're here to tend and befriend them. We're here to hold them. We're here to see them for what they are. And then they will naturally fall away because what we resist persists, but what we can feel, we can heal. So we can use this mantra. Darling, I am here for you. Darling, I care about your suffering, and that is why I am here for you. And we offer it to ourselves. So as we close out, let's again find ourselves in a meditative posture. Could be sitting, could be standing, could be lying down. Anything that allows us to take this backward step And as we take this backward step, we offer a loving presence to ourselves. And we can tell ourselves, almost holding ourselves the way we might a dear child, darling, I am here for you. Our first step to being there for somebody is to be there. Our first step to being there for ourselves is to be here. Body, heart, and mind united in this moment. And then bring to mind just a small difficulty. It's nice to start out with a 5-pound weight before moving on to a 50-pound weight. Just think of some difficulty, some small stress or challenge or irritation in your life. And meet that with compassion, a desire for that suffering to be alleviated. Darling, I know that you are suffering, and that is why I am here for you. As Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj would say, your constant search for pleasure and running from pain is a sign of the love that you bear for yourself. So tap into the love that we have for ourselves, that desire for suffering to be alleviated. Hmm. And once we have greased the gears, if you will, of love for ourselves, we can take that awakened heart, the bodhicitta, and extend it to all sentient beings. Wishing for all sentient beings to be free from suffering. And see this desire for all sentient beings to be free from suffering as our way of loving and meeting this life. A love without demands, commands, or conditions, a love that is simply emanating from the heart. And I'll close out with this poem by Marcia Falk. Loving life and its mysterious source with all our heart and all our spirit, all our senses and strength, we take upon ourselves these promises to care for the earth and those who live upon it, to pursue justice and peace, to love with kindness and compassion. We will teach this to our children throughout the passage of the day, as we dwell in our homes and as we go on our journeys, from the time we rise until the time we fall asleep. And may our actions be faithful to our words, that our children's children may live to know truth and kindness have embraced, peace and justice have kissed and are one. Loving life and its mysterious source with all our heart and all our spirit. May we honor ourselves for taking these steps, for doing this work. And on this task of unconditional love, may we love the parts of ourselves that have a hard time loving certain parts of ourselves. And that unshakable, unbreakable goodness, that secret beauty, that Buddha nature, that basic goodness in me honors, sees, and recognizes the same in you. Namaste.